I started my career in advertising. I went client-side, digital marketing roles, then ran the e-commerce function. So now I'm at Publicis Media. It's fascinating because I get exposed to a lot of different clients in a lot of different categories. And whilst the solutions might not be the same, there's definitely alignment on the critical importance of getting commerce right, but also the complexity. And I think that's something that will challenge that many of you may find, especially if you're selling indirect and are not in control of the entire sort of sales funnel or point of purchase. So I wanted to start today with 2 words. I think the first is exciting, because I do think it is an incredibly exciting time to be involved in commerce. You just have to look at the level of innovation and the pace of change and the speed at which pure play retailers like Amazon and kind of Alibaba are kind of gathering pace and dominating the market. I think that also comes with a huge element of hype. There's a lot of talk about AI, VR, IoT, all sorts of technologies. But I think within that hype, there is still some very interesting stuff happening. I think it's also interesting that we're starting to kind of blur the lines between brand marketing and sales-focused marketing, and also starting to blur the lines between online sales and offline sales. And that's really what I kind of mean when I talk about digital commerce, and talk to a lot of our clients about digital activity that drives sales in any channel, not just online. So an exciting time to be working in commerce, but I think we'd all agree it's also a very challenging time to be involved in commerce. I think it's challenging for a number of reasons. In big organizations, it often kind of crashes together marketing and sales teams, who maybe for years have been able to kind of coexist relatively separately because sales tracking and data is just difficult. So it's just accepted that there's cause and effect. Marketing does activity, and yes, it kind of drives sales through retail channels. But I think as technology improves, as data improves, as sales tracking improves, it starts to force the 2 organizations to work much closer together and start to work or establish much more of a culture of kind of optimization, actually working together to pull the levers of traffic and conversion to drive sales. But it's kind of complicated to navigate, especially in large organizations. I think it's challenging because keeping pace with the change is always going to be challenging. I think voice is a classic example of that, or will be over the next couple of years. And data, everyone talks about big scary data, but reality is it's challenging and it's complicated, especially if you are selling direct and you have complicated commercial agreements around different parts of the business. So I think exciting and challenging in equal measure. So today I just wanted to share 6 insights, thoughts, trends, and the reason why I have a picture of Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, and Leicester City up there is just to kind of make the point that I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would have put £5 on a £5 triple on Brexit, Trump, and Leicester City. And anyone know what I would have won if I'd put £5 on that triple? £15 million through Coral. So I don't have a crystal ball. So these aren't necessarily gospel, but hopefully they will be interesting discussion points or thought provokers for today's discussion. First off, innovation continues to flatten the sales funnel. I think this is about 2 things. I think this is about technical innovation and the growth in the number of different kind of commerce call to actions that we're seeing in the market, but also strategically, as brand marketing and sales marketing starts to kind of collapse, as more and more content becomes shoppable, as brands are able to present offers to consumers at any stage of the journey. So when we think about commerce call to actions, I think everyone normally reverts to the classic kind of buy now button, which still absolutely has a place and is growing as a way of brands to referring kind of traffic to online retailers. I think it's getting more sophisticated as brands start to integrate more data rather than just pricing. So, Burberry, for example, have a great where to buy solution on their site where they're actually putting in physical stock by store. So you can actually drive people in store rather than just online. I think there are many other examples out in the marketplace. Add to basket has obviously been around for a while. There are challenges with add to basket, given that consumers will have to log into grocery pages, but I think it's still a very relevant use case for certain categories, like recipes being an obvious example. I think digital couponing is improving sort of year on year. We work with a very smart startup that produces unique digital voucher codes based on a digital action, and then have a SaaS platform where you can actually see where that voucher is actually redeemed. So you can start doing some kind of hyper-local targeting. All this activity in Facebook drove redemption in these stores on the high street. We're seeing phenomenon like hosted checkout. There are suppliers who are producing technology that enables brands or consumers, to buy from retailer sites without leaving a brand's product page. So you actually go through the where to buy solution on a product page, go through the checkout process, and the consumer will never leave the product page, but automated bots essentially go off and inject payment into the retailer site, and the retailer then fulfills that order. I think there are challenges around this. Retailers don't like it because they aren't able to cross-sell consumers any other products. They're effectively known as crap propositions because they can't realize a profit. But I think it's just an insight to see how automation is starting to manifest itself. And actually, if retailers aren't prepared to provide the necessary sales tracking, then there are other solutions that can be investigated. We talked about voice earlier. I think it's clear that over the next couple of years, voice is going to kind of dominate the kind of commerce conversation. Amazon are clearly dominating at the moment, given the retail nature of their business. I don't think we should underestimate the power of Google Home, given the integration with the other services within their ecosystem. I think that voice has really interesting implications for designers and kind of UX design, because visual design is now going to need to be complemented with a whole new world of design. Designers are going to need to understand psychology and kind of voice patterns. So I think that's going to be a really interesting space over the coming years. And lots of people are starting to talk about this idea of programmatic commerce. And at a very basic level, we're seeing it with subscriptions at the moment, and how subscriptions are starting to rise in popularity, whether it's for fruit, meat, razor blades. But I think that's going to gather more momentum and power as we're able to analyze much more sophisticated individual level data. Imagine, I was doing some work with a beer brand recently. I think it's about trying to match all the different commerce call to actions to the different audiences, rather than just always serving up a kind of buy now button. It's right against this audience is the right call to action to send your friend a digital pint to redeem, in the high street. Is it about sending them to brand.com to buy a home pump? Is it about referring them to Tesco to buy a multi-pack? Is it about add to basket in a social media context? I think it will get more sophisticated, and we'll be able to test and learn different call to actions against different audiences. And then as sales tracking becomes more sophisticated, we can then start to optimize that in real time. So second one, patience is most definitely not a virtue. And I think this is a kind of observation on sort of broader modern life more than anything else. Does anyone know what the human attention span is currently documented at or classified in seconds? 8. And a goldfish? 9. So I think we all understand this with the kind of constant distraction of sort of digital devices, but I think it's having an interesting impact on commerce. This year we'll see the 21st birthday of kind of Generation Z. So we have this whole generation growing up who have become completely conditioned by the internet, but they've known nothing else. So they just accept that kind of things happen faster because they have absolutely no sort of frame of reference. And I think it's clearly providing some real disruption in the marketplace. We talk about hungry startups removing friction and barriers. You just think what Uber have done for taxis, and not just the fact that you can geolocate a taxi on your app, it can come to you, but they've removed all need for payment for cash. You simply get in and get out. And it's the same with Amazon. I was in Seattle with them earlier in the summer, and I went to their Go store, which is on beta at the bottom of their building. And it's only for employees at the moment, but you scan your card, and then you go and you just take whatever you want. It's mainly groceries. And then visual recognition software just works out what you've got, and your Amazon account is automatically debited. So the way that brands like that are able to totally remove friction and make things easy and immediate, I think is incredible. And as part of that, I think this whole idea of kind of last mile logistics is going to be absolutely critical over the coming years. It's clearly one of the most significant benefits of Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods. And you look at what Uber have done with Uber Eats. They've taken their kind of core business of transport and just transferred it over to food. So I think it's, consumers are at a stage where they can't wait and they're impatient. And I think the same can be said for large brands and organizations. We can't wait and be complacent, because there are always going to be sort of hungry startups that are going to be looking to disrupt this space and kind of appeal to Generation Z. So 2 down, 4 to go. Machines are starting to turn the wheels of e-commerce. I think it's impossible to have a presentation in 2017 in a marketing context and not mention AI. I mean, it's clearly, there's a lot of hype at the top of the Gartner hype curve last year. Everyone's talking about it, even though it's essentially been around since the 40s when Alan Turing was trying to crack the Enigma code. But it's clearly a key part of daily life, but the impact it's having on commerce, I think, is interesting. And it's been around for a while. We've had machine learning algorithms on platforms like Amazon and Netflix for a while, generating next best offers or most appropriate films based on previous viewing behavior. But I think this will start to be kind of turbocharged. We talked about programmatic commerce earlier, but just as we start to get more sophisticated individual level ID data, I think the way in which we'll be able to personalize experiences will improve dramatically. I think part of that is this idea of adaptive personalization, and a lot of people are writing about this at the moment in the sort of personalization engine space. So everybody, I'm sure, is frustrated when you shop at Christmas and you're buying bath salts for grandma and you're retargeted to the whole year for bath salts. And this idea of adaptive personalization is actually trying to understand your purchasing habits to such an extent that you can actually work out what your purchasing preferences are versus what you're buying for family, for colleagues, for friends. It's going to be an interesting sort of progression in the personalization engine space. And predictive analytics, I think it's certainly not as sexy as kind of voice assistants, but I think this is the core of kind of AI when it comes to commerce. So being able to use predictive analytics to manage manage your inventory. So actually understand your SKU availability, where should you range certain barbecue SKUs in the summer based on historical data, weather patterns, events, and also not just in terms of inventory, but also in terms of marketing performance. I think we'll quickly get to a stage where, imagine a time where we have an analytics sort of platform and you say, right, 20% of my budget is set aside to close the sale with my retailers, and I have my top 10 retailers. And actually, all of the tracking is sufficiently sophisticated that I'll be able to understand my cost per acquisition, per SKU, per retailer. and then you can actually deploy your media money strategically to drive sales, so basically clearing stock out of channel. And then you'll be able to report back to your management on a quarterly basis, saying, okay, if you give me £1 million, I know up front what our ROAS is going to be because I've got enough historical data in the system. It seems like it's a long way off as everyone battles with sales tracking, but I think it absolutely will happen. It's just a question of time. Traditional purchase cycles are being turned on their head. I was thinking about this when putting this presentation together. It wasn't that long ago, before a world of kind of online retailing, that we just had very accepted traditional purchase cycles and seasons. There was Christmas, there was a January sales, there was maybe August sales. But if you look at what the pure play retailers have done to kind of disrupt these purchase cycles, I think it's incredible. Black Friday, admittedly, has been around slightly longer, probably since the 50s in the US, as a way of kind of marking the start of the holiday season. But I've kind of included it as a point of reference. Because last year on Black Friday in the US, there were $3.34 billion worth of sales in a 24-hour period. But that's been established, and that's been around since the 50s. If you think about Amazon Prime started in 2005 simply as a proposition around free delivery. And as we all know, has just grown substantially into a much more comprehensive proposition around content and delivery, preferential treatment on the platform. And they launched Prime Day in 2015. So after three years, let's have a guess how much they've been able to generate to the nearest billion. Okay, so it's 1, which is still quite impressive given that's been three years from essentially kind of standing start. They've created this kind of independent trading day around their Prime membership. And this year, half of US households are expected to be part of the Prime program. So I think that it's impressive, but I think that the bigger story is in China with Alibaba and Singles Day. Singles Day has been around from the 90s as a kind of anti-Valentine's Day sort of day, or festival, but day. And Alibaba adopted it in 2009 and kind of commercialized it and turned it into a key kind of trading day. And sales just grow year on year. So 2016, in a 24-hour period, in US dollars to the nearest billion, any idea what Alibaba took last year on Singles Day?
14.
Nearly 18. Yeah. In a 24-hour period. I think that's absolutely incredible. And I'm not suggesting, for one moment that every brand goes out and tries to instigate their own kind of trading day. But I just think it's an interesting point. And even, we're talking about in terms of annual purchase cycles. Even if you look at day part, you see that mobile, traffic is starting to peak outside of what were conventional sort of trading hours. So I think this idea that traditional purchase cycles are kind of being turned on their head, whether it's actually in the kind of day or on an annual basis, it's an interesting point, and I think it's worth thinking about how brands can start to maybe not disrupt and set up their own trading days, but piggyback off key purchase points or cycles in different markets. Are we going to follow east with commerce becoming more social? I think this is a really interesting topic. It's clear that China has a completely different ecosystem when it comes to e-commerce. But I think it also shows that they have completely different consumer behaviors. Commerce is much more social in China. And a lot of that is down to the platforms and technologies. So if you think about WeChat, it's described as a kind of amalgamation of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, but with seamless payment integrated. And the level of engagement that they're able to glean is incredible. They have over 800 million active monthly users, and average users spend 70 minutes on their platform on a daily basis. Facebook is 50. And it means that brands are able to engage in really creative ways. H&M ran an arcade sort of pinball game that they sent to their base, and then when you finish that pinball game, you got dropped into their store within WeChat. Even premium fashion brands, Dior was doing a flash sale of £4,000 handbags in WeChat. I think WeChat's interesting because it's often smaller payments. I think for larger items, eBay equivalent, kind of Taobao is a popular site. But when we're looking at sort of peer-to-peer micro payments and purchasing of small items, WeChat is certainly kind of leads the way in China. And if you look at how that's transitioned over to the West, I think social commerce it's also had a bit of a sort of full start over here. You look at Twitter started to launch their buy now proposition or their buy now buttons and actually withdrew it. I think a lot of that was because of the lack of integration with other platforms and technologies. And Facebook Marketplace, even though it's been live for a few years, has started off being just a marketplace for Facebook users to kind of sell stuff to each other, a kind of Craigslist. But I think it's going to get interesting because they are starting to integrate things like ticket sales and actually products from other retailers. So I think Facebook Marketplace will start to take off. I think to answer the question, will commerce become more social? I think yes, absolutely. It has to. But I think it will take time until we get to a stage where there are various platforms and technologies, especially payments, seamlessly integrated together as they are in China. Okay, so final point, and this is the one that I'm probably most passionate about, and this is the one that's probably most relevant to today's discussion. I think that digital trade marketing, digital co-op, is undergoing wholesale change at the moment, and this will start to accelerate over the next couple of years. From a media perspective, you have Mark Pritchard at P&G talking about the importance of transparency when we buy media for brands. And that is starting to filter down to the brand-retailer relationship. And retailers have not historically given brands enough visibility on sales performance. Performance reporting might come every 8 weeks in a locked PDF. And it's unacceptable. If you're a brand spending huge amounts of money on retailers, you deserve the same level of transparency you get when you buy media on other publishers. When I was at Nokia, I knew I was just funding sales of competitive devices because all this co-op money would just go over into retailers. It would go into a communal pot, and their online sales team would just optimize whatever was selling, that particular day. So I think it's going to move from being quite a murky, opaque part of the marketing conversation to eventually being completely transparent, as other media buys are. And I think it's going to happen for a number of reasons. I think one is the technical innovation that we're going to see in personalization engines. So Amazon and Alibaba are clearly leading the market, and they're able to offer brands and media agencies much more sophisticated media packages. You're able to buy very clear and well-targeted audiences. And other brands, you're starting to see Walmart and Asda starting to kind of follow suit, but the longer tail, more traditional retailers will eventually start to deploy more sophisticated personalization engines that mean that we'll be able to buy much more sophisticated audiences in the same way that we do on Amazon and Alibaba. I also think that the capability gap in sales organizations is rapidly closing. I think, years ago, the co-op or the trade marketing deals were often negotiated by sales guys that didn't really understand digital, that certainly weren't confident having conversations about landing page optimization, sales tracking, or digital media buys. And I think as more digitally competent people are rising up through organizations, and I think it's talking to a lot of you guys in the room today, the level of commercial agreements with retailers is getting much more sophisticated. It's beyond just coming back to your marketing team and saying, I've done the co-op plan, I've got a banner on the homepage. It's actually being able to negotiate specific audiences, on-site search parameters or results, on-site content. I think we'll get to a stage, and certain brands are, where the co-op agreements are much more sophisticated and negotiated at a very granular level. And imagine a stage where you're able to go back to your business and say, right, your agreement with retailer X is here, and it's based on 10 very specific criteria. And actually, we've been looking at daily compliance, and compliance net for the quarter is down 9%. Right, here is the evidence for your sales teams to negotiate rebates back from the retailers. And suddenly you can start to see how co-op can become as transparent as other kind of media buys. But it's difficult, and you might wonder why I've got a Russian doll picture on here, but I think there's almost like a Russian doll of commercial agreements between a brand and a retailer, and often it is difficult to just extract the kind of digital media element, or just extract the kind of content conversation. But I think it will happen, and it's too important not to get right. I work with a particular brand whose co-op budgets at the moment are 5 times that of their consumer marketing spends. And there's huge pressure in organizations to actually show that you can actually get an acceptable return and have an acceptable level of transparency on those significant buys. So, to summarize, 6 points that will hopefully be sort of food for thought for today. Innovation continues to flatten the sales funnel. Lots of interesting commerce call to actions coming into the marketplace. Patience, definitely not a virtue. 8-second attention span, and Generation X sort of coming of age. Machines starting to turn the wheels of commerce. Predictive analytics, adaptive personalization. Purchase cycles being turned on their head. I just think that 17.8 billion from Alibaba is just eye-watering. But I think interesting point, whether it's calendar year or day part. Is commerce going to become more social? Yes, I think absolutely, but I think it will take time. And I think probably most relevant for today and the rest of the discussion today is this point around digital trade marketing, and actually how you start to help kind of accelerate that change so that you have the same level of transparency with retailers as you do with other media buyers. Thanks.